Welcome back, Rebel fans. You're listening to another episode of the Rebel Talk presented by the Rebel Walk. I'm Cam Wicker, and as always, I'm here with Zach Mareth. It's been a little while since we've been with you guys. It's been a pretty busy summer for me and Zach. We've been both working a little bit. I'm entering senior year of college. Zach entering sophomore year. It's been a little busy summer for us, getting ready for football and everything. So we're finally back in front of the computer, being able to talk to you guys. Not much going on other than Ole Miss football. Pretty big anticipated football season this year, and a pretty interesting game one, pretty high scoring game one, and a lot of fans probably enjoyed that one. I think it was the third highest attendance in school history, if I recall reading that right. So it was a pretty big weekend in Oxford for a week one FCS opponent in Furman. We'll hop into that soon. But I wanted to start off just talking about a little recruiting. We haven't talked to you guys pretty much all summer, so won't be able to run through all the recruits really, but we'll run through some of the guys that we've been seeing recently pop up for Ole Miss, most notably the commitments for Ole Miss. Start off, four-star Dylan Alfred recommitted to the Rebels a couple months back. He decommitted from the Rebels, recommitted to the Rebels recently. 5'11" receiver, pretty speed threat guy from Alabama. Like I said, was committed to the Rebels before. I think Alfred's a pretty good pickup for the Rebels. I was really hoping he'd commit back. I don't know about you, Zach, but I really like what I see out of this kid. He reminds me a little bit of like Elijah Moore, kind of like Caden Lee in the slot. Just throw it to him in space. What do you think about Alfred, Zach?
Yeah, he's a creative player, Cam. He does a lot of training with Mike Espy, which is always a great sign for me because, Espy's just a great leader, and he trains a lot of those guys like Mingo and Malik Heath. He has a lot of experience with receivers. I will say Dabo Sweeney at Clemson, he gets weird when guys who are committed visit him. So clearly Clemson had a huge push at Alfred, but guess what? It didn't end up working, and we got him back. So, and that was one of those guys who decommitted. I think it was like that week in June when Ole Miss lost like 5 commits, something crazy. But he's back, so that's incredible news. And again, like you said, Elijah Moore type player, very creative in the slot. Can probably play on the outside too because he's just very athletic. And his little brother Devin is also a beast, so keep an eye out for him as well.
Absolutely. And I know a lot of people probably look at the smaller receivers, always look at that size of those guys and the weight of those guys coming out of high school. I just want you guys to keep in mind Elijah Moore wasn't the biggest guy either. I think about 185 pounds in college, probably around the same size now in the NFL. Caden Lee, I think, is listed at 5'10", 175. Not the biggest guy on the field, but it doesn't really matter when you're playing receiver. I feel like, especially once you get into the college level, just get these guys in space, give them the football, and I think that's what they're going to do with Alfred when he gets to Ole Miss.
100%.
Moving on to the next guy, 4-star running back Shakai Mills-Knight. I don't know if you guys got to watch this guy on TV. He was on ESPN, I think, 2 weeks ago in a nationally televised game. He had 160 yards in that game and a touchdown, and really kind of willed his team to that victory on the ground as a workhorse. He's a power type back, 6'1", 220, 215. I really like what I see out of him. Ole Miss doesn't seem to get a lot of like top tier backs out of high school in recent years. Usually going after those lower tier guys, 3-stars, just kind of working them up. So it seems like what Kiffin likes to do, but this is a premier back that Kiffin can add to this roster, especially losing some other guys in commitments and decommitments. But I think Shakai Mills-Knight can be a superstar for this team in the future.
Yeah, I'm not trying to drink too much of the Kool-Aid here, Cam, but to me, he's got a couple inches taller than Quinshon Judkins, and he's faster than Quinshon, but he's built like Quinshon. Yeah. So that's usually a good sign for a player who hasn't even reached the collegiate level yet. And like you said, on national TV, he went crazy. He plays in a really good program over at Baylor in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So just a really skilled player who, again, has a chance to come in here and play as a freshman because Lane does not care if you're a freshman, if you're a super senior, whatever the case is. If you can play, you can play. And Shakai Mills-Knight is definitely one of those players.
Absolutely. I watched that game a little bit too, just watching it live. He seems like a complete type back, not the guy that's just going to hand it into him every time. He was catching the ball, pass blocking. Like you said, he plays for a major program, so there seems like they run kind of an offense that would get you ready for the next level. And I think Shakai Mills-Knight's a huge pickup for the Rebels. Moving on to 3-star linebacker Bryson Walters. Physical specimen, that's all I can really say about him. As soon as I saw him, 225 pounds, really stands out. Didn't really get to watch much film on him, watched a couple highlights of him on Twitter. Seems like a solid tackler, an aggressive player, a hard hitter, and I think that's what the Rebels are looking for in this next high school class. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of guys on this roster who are underclassmen playing linebacker. off the top of my head, I can only think of like four to five guys that are actually at a traditional linebacker spot for the Rebels this year.
Yeah.
So I expect maybe in the portal in high school, Kiffin and Pete Golden are going to go after some linebackers, and Bryson Walters is the start of this.
Yeah, he's a really talented player, and you have to remember this, Cam. Ole Miss has one of the best evaluating services in the country. You have so many former NFL people like Joe Judge, former head coaches who are Zach Arnett, who's on staff, and then you got Glasscock coming over from Texas to be the GM, Alex Brown from SMU. Like their evaluation staff is elite. So at some point, you kind of have to remove the stars out of the equation and just trust the work that's going into this, because Ole Miss does not hand out offers to players who they don't think can come in here and actually make a name for themselves. So I'm really excited for Walters. Like you said, he's already a really big player. He has the size, and of him developing in Pete Golding's defense is going to be special.
Absolutely, and like you said, it doesn't matter the star really. I don't know if you guys really paid attention to the second half of that game this past week against Furman, but guys like Tyler Banks were out there, not the highest ranked linebacker coming out of high school. Tyler Banks was out there looking good. Has been well coached by guys like Pete Golden, and that's all it takes. You got guys that are coming in 3-star linebackers. You don't always get high profile linebackers out of high school unless you're getting those guys that are in the top 50. So a guy like Walters is a guy you can coach up, a guy that's got the physical attributes, and a guy that Pete Golden. If you just listen to Pete Golden, if you listen to those guys, you can see the field at some point for Ole Miss.
Exactly, Cam. I'm with you, bro.
Absolutely. Going on to the visitors list for game one, pretty long list here. We won't really touch too much on these guys, but we'll mention a couple of these names. This past weekend in town was 5-star wide receiver Caleb Cunningham. He's committed to Alabama. Ole Miss is still in that conversation with him. I believe Mississippi State is as well. So we'll see what Cunningham ends up, ultimately deciding on before signing day for 2025 class. But he was in town this weekend. We had 4-star wide receiver Ole Miss commit Dylan Alper was in town. 4-star safety Ladarian Clarity, who I believe was committed to the Rebels at one point, correct? Or has been close to commitment at the Rebels?
He was about to commit
a
day, and then he moved the date back, and I think it's like September 21st now.
Yep, September 21st. So he's a pretty big-time, high-profile defensive back in that high school class. Seems like a lot of the guys on the Ole Miss staff really want to get him. Number 15th ranked safety in the nation, out of Florida. So I'd like to see Clarity make a decision later this year towards the Rebels. But we'll have to wait and see that. 4-star linebacker Jacoby Hobson was also in town, committed to the Rebels. Defensive lineman Andrew Maddock, little brother of AJ Maddock, also committed to the Rebels. He was in town this weekend. Warren Nolan, not committed, little brother of Walter Nolan, interior offensive lineman. He was in town this weekend as well too. We'll have to see if that kind of domino effect there with his older brother being on the roster. I'm going to some 2026 guys now. Luke Fahey, quarterback, not committed out of California. He was in town this weekend. Uncommitted wide receiver Vance Spafford was in town this weekend. And uncommitted corner D.D. Daniels was in town this weekend. Those are just some of the guys who were in town this weekend, not touching too much on those guys. Some of those guys uncommitted, some of those guys not sure where they're going or don't have a set date to commit yet other than Clarity. But we'll have to see some of these guys as it plays out for the rest of the year, and we'll see a lot of more visits out of these guys going down the road as the year goes on.
Without a doubt, Cam. And, we've been saying it the whole time, but a commitment doesn't really mean much these days until you put the pen on the paper. So with Caleb Cunningham, I would expect this to go down to the last second of signing day. Like, who's going to call him that morning and where is he going to end up? But Ole Miss is very much still in that race, despite him being committed to Bama.
Absolutely. Guys like Cunningham and Clarity, even guys like Alfred, it could come down to the last bit where pen's on paper. So just hold your breath on those guys. Obviously, no downplay to any of those guys, but we'll have to see what happens when they put pen to paper later this fall or later in the spring. We'll have to see when that happens. I think that's all we got for you guys for recruiting. So after this short break, we'll hop into a recap of this past week against Furman, and we'll talk a little about the upcoming matchup against Middle Tennessee. So pretty big weekend in Oxford this weekend. A lot of people in town. The Grove was packed. It was raining. People were sliding in the mud. It was a fun weekend in town. In town, Zach. I'm sure you can attest to that. I believe you were in the stands, correct? I was up in the booth covering the game. It was a heck of a game. Not the most competitive game, but it was good to see the Ole Miss offense finally out there. Good to see the Ole Miss defense, the new look Ole Miss defense with a lot of new faces out there. And I guess the only thing I can really say is that defense was dominant, Zach. I don't know what you saw, but that defense was dominant.
Yeah, Lane talked about it post game, Cam, but that front four between Princely, Walter, JJ, and Jared Ivey is legit, man. And you have to think, like, looking back to last year, it's no disrespect to last year's defense, but Jared Ivey might have been the best player on that defensive line. And this year, not only is Jared Ivey, you could argue that he's one of the best, but I think at his caliber of play, you have three other players. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All of them are right up there as elite potential NFL players. And when you have that, it's just disruptive, Cam. There wasn't one point in the game when Furman was able to actually run the ball. The only passes they seemed to get off were from miscommunications in the secondary. But again, man, it was really fun to watch. Obviously, take it with a grain of salt. They're playing Furman, but to allow 0 points to any college football team, that passes the bar for me, if I'm being honest.
Absolutely. And Furman's, like you said, Furman is FCS school, but hanging 76 and then putting a 0 on the school board as well is very impressive for anybody. I mean, not every team was hanging up 76 on FCS opponents that they played this past week. And I mean, the Paladins aren't a bad program. I think they were 9th ranked in FCS to start the year. They played some close games against higher profile opponents in recent years. Weren't the most experienced team this year, losing a lot of their guys to just graduation or to the portal this past season. They lost their quarterback in the transfer portal, but they have a well-coached team, a good coach that's been there for about 8 years in Clay Hendricks. And like I said, they were 9th ranked in FCS. So, I mean, it's not like they were just going to lay over and let Ole Miss do whatever they wanted. It just seemed like at some points Ole Miss could do whatever they wanted, especially on the offensive end. And like you said, on the defensive side of the ball, I think Furman had -3 total yards in the second half because the passing yards were just completely wiped out by the negative rushing yards that Ole Miss held Furman to. And like you said, that defensive line front, just in the beginning of the game, I believe Kiffin commented on it in the postgame saying that just that first four front was just elite. Looking at Walter Nolan and JJ Pegues in the middle there, it just seemed like nothing was getting through them. It seemed like no one was getting any type of push against those guys. You had guys come in like Cam Franklin, who looked amazing in his time out there. Poopaw didn't play much in the first half, but he looked amazing coming off the edge in the second half. This team's just really deep on the defensive end, really deep on the offensive end. But I don't think I recall a time watching Ole Miss in the past of this defense just being able to rotate that many guys on the defensive line.
No, definitely not, Cam. And I'm jumping ahead of myself here, but if anyone was watching that LSU game last night, their offensive line, despite all the hype about those 2 first-round tackles, they were really vulnerable at some points, especially in the middle. So I'm excited for Nolan and JJ to have that opportunity in Death Valley, along with Trey Amos in that Kyron Lacey matchup, dude. I was just envisioning it last night. Like, they are going to go at it all night long. Whatever. I'm getting ahead of myself. Going back to the Furman game, yeah, Trey Amos looked incredible. I did want to point that out. He is that lockdown corner. I think he's a first or second round talent, no doubt. Also, I really enjoyed watching Isaiah Hamilton play on the other side of him. He also seemed to be pretty locked down in the safeties between Trey Washington, John Saunders, Lewis Moore. I'm sure I'm forgetting one, but they all really did a good job. Lewis Moore, shout out our guy Cam, but he made a tackle, I think in the first or second quarter, that basically prevented what could have been Furman's only touchdown. So shout out Lou, but yeah, really, really impressive stuff from the defense.
And just mentioning Lou Williams and those hybrid safeties like him and Yam Banks and Key Lawrence and those guys. I love seeing Lou Morris down in the box, putting an extra man down in the box for one game for Ole Miss. It seemed like at some point you had like a 4-4 front for Ole Miss, 8 guys in the box at some points just to completely stop the run and get rid of it. Like you said earlier, it seemed like the only time Furman was able to just get any type of green grass in the open was when secondary was miscommunication on the back end. It just seemed like that was the only time things were getting going for Furman. So other than that, I think the Ole Miss defense looked really good outside of those blown coverages at points early in the game. But really just overall great performance as a team from a whole. I believe Kiffin talked about it after the game, just discipline. Pooh Paul was on the podium after the game saying there's no reason to pout about not starting. You're going to get your chance, root your guys on the sideline and keep the energy up. I think that's what this team is going to need. There's so many guys that could start right now for any other program, but they chose to be here and chose to try to win a championship at Ole Miss. So that's the attitude you're going to need, is guys willing to sit on the sideline, knowing they're going to get their chance eventually.
And yeah, another thing I want to comment on, Cam, is in Trey Harris's post game, he's talking about how, Jackson felt he was slipping up a little bit, losing focus, and he got him right back on track for the game. I'm getting like some Tim Tebow vibes here for those who watched that Florida documentary from Jackson Dart. Just this dude is locked in every aspect. It's like putting a chip on Trey Harris's shoulder because he's not focused or whatever he said. Like, that is some real good teammate stuff right there. Because as you know, Trey and Jackson have a very good relationship. So if he's holding Trey accountable, you better believe he's holding every single person on that team accountable. So shout out Jackson. Also, in regards to Jackson Dart, the deep ball looked incredible. I think he hit on basically every deep ball that he threw. The ones that impressed me the most were the Trey Harris touchdown and the Juice Wells touchdown, which were awesome. Just really promising stuff, Cam. Again, I know it was Furman. I'm taking it with a grain of salt, but like they did exactly what they were supposed to. So shout out to the Rebs, especially Jackson Dart, holding it down with everyone and making sure everyone's locked in, even against an FCS opponent.
Absolutely. Just recapping that Furman game a little bit. Jackson Dart went 22 for 27, 418 yards, 6 total touchdowns, 5 through the air. He played one half of football, guys. He didn't play the entire game. I thought at one point that he was going to come out in the second quarter, but he kept going. Kiffin kept wanting to, I guess, kind of make a statement there late in the half, is like, we're not done yet. And Dart kept going. Dart kept throwing the ball out there more. It seemed like he found Trey Harris a lot more in the second quarter after sharing it around in the first half. It was good to see both tight ends out there, both of them catching passes. Daquan Wright and Caden Prescorn both caught touchdown passes. And we know Caden Prescorn is going to be that guy, but Daquan White, I believe even last week they said Kiffin or Dart. One of them said that both these guys are NFL tight ends.
Yeah.
And I believe that wholeheartedly. Both these guys have the size, have the ability to play. I just think Prescorn brings a different type of energy to that run game, being able to run behind him as well as that big offensive line. And another thing that Kiffin pointed out in that press conference was Dart had all day to throw the football. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but it seemed like at times Dart could have just stood back there and threw the football.
Yeah, Cam, that offensive line was very locked in. And I'm just excited to see, I bet they're feeling good about not having to block Walter Nolan and Uman Mielen all day long. That's probably a promising feeling for once. But, especially when we get into SEC play, we're going to really find out what they're made of. But again, we're taking this. It was the first game, first time we got to see them live, and they crushed it. So I don't have much bad to say. There's not much else to compare it off of because they've only played one game, but definitely a promising start for Ole Miss.
Absolutely. A couple of things to touch on before we move into a little preview of the Middle Tennessee game. I wanted to add that Henry Parrish Jr. looked great in a starting running back role. Bentley didn't get much playing time, but I don't think any rusher for Ole Miss went over 70 yards. I think Matt Jones led the team with 68 on his 3 rushes, which was great to see that from Matt Jones out there. But I think they rushed for over 230 yards as a team, which is pretty good for nobody getting over 100 yards rushing on the day. But really just for Parrish Jr., he looked great in the pass blocking. He looked really patient as a runner, really just an overall better player than he was when he was last year at Ole Miss. Not any knock to him there, but it just seems like he's developed a lot more to his game since going to Miami and then coming back to Ole Miss. And I think there's a real reason why Parrish Jr. was named the starter. But all respect to Bentley and hope he can see the field soon. But it was good to see him out there get a couple carries late in that game and late in the first half. But Parrish Jr. looked great in his time out there. And also Micah Davis looked like an elite returner. I know it's Furman, but just anytime you kicked the Micah Davis in that game, it seemed like he had a chance.
Yeah, I really enjoy what I saw from Micah Davis. And it's bigger than him just being a talented player. He gives Jordan Watkins that ability to take a breather. Or, again, if Jordan comes back and his knee's hurting him again, then Jordan doesn't have to return punts or kicks. There's not all this pressure for Watkins to be out there, unlike last year when he was literally catching punts with a broken hand. In regards to the running back room Cam, I thought Parrish did a fantastic job. His patience the second he gets the ball, his ability to read the defense stood out to me. It's promising, especially when you're going to go against SEC play, when the game starts moving a lot faster. And we all know what to expect from Bentley. I'm not concerned one bit. He's a fantastic running back 2 option, and you can start him at any point as well. So, again, promising stuff. I thought they killed it in the pass block protection too. Shout out Parrish for that. But great start for the Rebs and in that running game too. Despite all the passing game, all the passing touchdowns, they did a great job.
Absolutely. Rashad Amos, Dominic Thomas also saw some time, and we'll see how long it takes for Logan Fields to feel comfortable enough to get back on the field. But when he gets back on the field, that's another piece added to that running back room to just give anybody a breather when they need one. I think that's all we got for the recap of the Furman game. Ole Miss 1-0 going into next week against Middle Tennessee. I got a little preview again for Middle Tennessee, coached by former Vandy HC Derek Mason. I don't know if any of you guys recall that. Derek Mason coached for Vandy a couple of years back, played Ole Miss a good bit of times every year when Ole Miss and Vandy would play. Not a great Middle Tennessee team last year, 4-8 in 2023, 3-5 in Conference USA. Didn't really lose a lot of guys from that last year's roster either, returning their quarterback, Nick Vattiato. He played last week against Tennessee Tech, started all last year for them, started game 1 against Tennessee Tech this past week. Not the greatest showing from Middle Tennessee last week against Tennessee Tech. They were up 21-0 at one point, blew that lead. Tennessee Tech went on a 25-3 run until late in the game when Middle Tennessee scored a touchdown to win it late. Not much to add off that game for them. I didn't really get to watch it. Just kind of looked at the stats, looked at a couple highlights, and see how that game went for them. But this is a new Middle Tennessee team than last year when they went 4-8. They've already started off 1-0 this year. They have a new offensive coordinator, a new head coach. Like I said, brought back a lot of guys on that offense, brought back a lot of guys on their defense. And looking at their schedule last year, it seemed like, even though 4-8 doesn't do your team justice or anything, but 7 of the 12 games they played last year were one-possession games. So, this is a team that's going to fight to the end. I believe they played Mizzou, lost by 4 early in the year last year. So this is not a team that's going to lay down to a top-ranked team. So this is a team another game that Ole Miss is going to have to stay focused for and make sure that they're ready for this team.
Yeah, Cam, and I think more than anything, this is kind of another mental test with Ole Miss because you win your first game 76-0, and you have a very similar opponent in Middle Tennessee. So again, what type of attitude do they bring to the field? How are they going to get off the bus? I have no doubt that Kiffin and Jackson and all those leaders on the team are going to get the guys locked in. And again, this should be another blowout. I'm just excited to see what type of energy they bring to the field this week after what they did in week 1.
Absolutely. Ole Miss is always going to have, until they lose a game or eventually lose a game this season, if that happens, they will always have that top-ranked number on the back of their backs this year, coming into the season ranked number 6. No telling where they'll be at if they'll move up this week. I don't believe the AP poll will come out today. I believe it'll probably come out tomorrow since Florida State will be playing today.
Yeah.
So we'll have to wait to see where Ole Miss is at in that one come tomorrow. But like I said, there's going to be a target on this team's back no matter who they're playing, whether it's this week, whether it's the next week against Wake Forest or in a couple of weeks against LSU and Baton Rouge. They're going to have a target on their back, and they're just going to have to compete every week and know that you have to get the job done and stay focused.
Yeah, Cam, it's going to be a good one. And hopefully, for those who were in the Grove, it doesn't rain this week and we can actually see the Walk of Champions. But I'm really looking forward to watching those boys get back on the field.
Absolutely. And I think the weather's actually supposed to be a little bit nicer come Wednesday. I think the temperature is supposed to drop a little bit in Oxford up to the mid-80s. So hopefully it'll start feeling like fall a little bit here in Oxford, and the fans won't be too hot out there for a 3:15 game next week against Middle Tennessee. Kind of just some little quick facts about this Middle Tennessee matchup. No other meeting other than 2001. Ole Miss won 45-17 there. There's another. We're gonna have to see if, like I said, if they're gonna be able to. Ole Miss is gonna be able to take advantage of another lower tier program in Middle Tennessee, like they did last week against Furman. We'll have to see if they're able to stay focused, score points. I think it was really impressive the way you put up a 0 last week. I think the challenge is this week, see if you can do that again.
Yep.
See what you can do and not show too much of that offense either going into Wake Forest. You're going to be on the road. Wake Forest, a lot of people may not respect them as an opponent, but it's on the road in Winston-Salem and is an ACC opponent. So this is another game where I feel like Ole Miss might not show too much considering you're heading into to enemy territory a week later. So we'll have to see what Ole Miss shows this week. We'll have to see how long those starters play, and see if this game gets out of hand at any point. I know at one point after the game on Saturday, Trey Harris tweeted out on Twitter that he was going for 4 touchdowns next week. So we'll have to see how that plays out for Trey Harris.
Yeah, Cam. Again, I think the goal for this week is keep everyone healthy and just go dominate, man. Like let's continue to show these boys that the Rebs they're not playing this year. That should be the goal. Starters should be pulled by halftime, and Ole Miss should be 2-0. That's all I'll say.
Absolutely, absolutely. I believe Ole Miss is 40-point favorite in this game. I think they were 42-point favorites last week. I think this one started off as like a 37-point favorite, so
it's gone up.
It's gone up a couple points here in the recent days. So we'll have to see how that goes up throughout the week. No real injury report for this team right now. Someone tried to get a Watkins report out of Kiffin after the game, but he really wasn't given much, just saying that Watkins was not available. So we'll have to see what happens there with Jordan Watkins. Not really an emergency thing to get him back on the field. You got Caden Lee starting in the slot right now. You got guys like Norrell White who can step up, guys like Aiden Williams who can step up. Micah Davis was out there playing receiver last week as well as returners. So we'll have to see where Watkins is at. It was good to see Princely out there after thinking he really wasn't going to play most of the preseason. Really wasn't thinking he was going to play to start the season until later in the year, but it was good to see him out there. He was pretty athletic, coming off the ball really fast, and but other than those guys, no real injury report for next week, unless you know any of the other guys, Zach.
No, I mean, I keep your eyes out for Watkins. I wouldn't imagine they're going to rush him back, so don't be panicked if he's not out there again. But other than that, the team looked pretty healthy, and again, Lane, he's not going to tell us much. So,
absolutely. I think that's all we got for you guys this week. We have pressers today with Kiffin and the players later. I think at 1:15. I believe I'll be at those to see what's going on there. Game this weekend in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium again. 3:15 kickoff on SEC Network versus Middle Tennessee. I'll have coverage on that game as well. But I think that's all we got for you guys this week. So just make sure to stay tuned to the Rebel Walk for all your Ole Miss sports needs.